Hello, everybody. Hey, Ross. Hey, Gareth.
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
Chris.
How are you doing?
I'm really good. I tell you what, that intro not only proves what a person who's not a designer and Canva can do, but also it always pumps me up to feel really excited about this.
That's the music that plays in my head as I walk down the street.
Oh, so you've got a theme tune, have you, as well? I've got one a bit similar to that. Gareth, do you have a theme tune?
No, I don't. You've just made me think I need to get a theme tune. I'll
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
Benny
think
Hill.
about that.
Benny Hill.
Yeah. When you're like quietly walking down the street, you need a bit of a theme tune. Like if you
Yeah,
don't have
okay.
that going, I'm just saying, if you don't, then it's terrible for you. Whereabouts in the world are you today, Gareth?
I am in central London. I'm running a training course tomorrow. So I've come back from the conference last
Yes,
week
on the
and
beach.
straight into London. Exactly, yeah. And just staying in an apartment. And the connection isn't great here. So I'm running on a 4G connection. So my phone was quicker than the actual broadband in the Airbnb. So fingers crossed it'll be okay.
I think we'll forgive you, given that you live a nomadic lifestyle now.
I do. I do.
Have you been for any other secret dinners since we last saw you?
Secret dinners. Oh, oh yes. I forgot all about that.
So for
No,
those of
but
you
you did.
watching, for those of you watching, Gareth and his partner disappeared off at the conference and went for a secret dinner, only to find out that we also disappeared for a secret dinner and happened to have one at the same restaurant.
Yes, although mine wasn't secret. I was just going out. I was hungry. So
Yeah, no, you've said
yeah.
that a lot, but the protestation suggests otherwise. So Ross, you're in London, obviously, with your fantastic lighting and your microphone that works this time and all sorts of things. That's great.
Yes, I am. I am literally a couple of doors away from you, which is a joy and a delight and the thing that keeps me going day to day, knowing that I have got expert agency coaching advice literally a stone's throw away. I actually used to live closer to Chris, for those that are interested. And when I went out on my balcony to do a little bit of, naked yoga or sunbathing, he could literally see me from his balcony. So I've moved a little bit further away, but we're still in, spitting distance. But yeah, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. It's been a while and I've upgraded from these,
Yes.
which actually I think are great, to this fancy stuff now. So hopefully it's better for those listening.
It still sounds Scottish, but I think there's a filter for that coming. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean the way that I say road and the way that you say road, I imagine, are very different.
Yeah, and I think the over the line through it means something else. It sounds like something else. But anyway, that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about emerging from survival leadership. I think that means an awful lot of different things. And as I was thinking about like prepping for all of today, it occurred to me that it doesn't just mean actual survival, as in like a general in a war. It kind of also means you're trying to help the team, the business, the people around you survive as much as yourself. And sometimes the two things need to be quite well considered. And I think as veteran leaders of agencies and an ex-embattered leader of an agency, I think we've got a good story to tell. I think the first thing I'd love to talk about, though, is kind of like, what is survival leadership in your opinion? Like for me, Ross, you've seen my go bag. I've got a 30-kilo go bag ready to go when the nuclear bombs go off. Although living in central London, I suspect I won't need the bag. But it's got everything I need in it to survive for a few months, food rations, that sort of stuff. Survival leadership, from my perspective, is it's that kind of, you have to make decisions quick. You have to, failure isn't an option. But oftentimes you're making those kinds of decisions because there's something around the corner ready to get you. Excuse me, Gareth, what's your kind of perspective on what survival leadership might well be?
Yeah, I think you've touched on a good point there. It's about being prepared and being prepared for, obviously in the business context. We're not talking, fighting for your life, hopefully, but certainly being prepared for hostile working environments in terms of the economy, as we've got now, with very unpredictable environments in terms of cost of living crisis. We had the pandemic before. It's quite a challenging time to be a leader at the front, whether you own a business or not, or you're responsible and accountable for large teams. It's about being able to react to changing circumstances quickly, and protecting those, from a professional sense, those around you in terms of their needs, their professional needs, and of course, ultimately, people have jobs to get paid. So that's the difference, I think, between a leader and those who support the leader. That ultimately, the leader has that decision-making capability and responsibility. So they have to be prepared to go and make decisions in a given circumstance.
Yeah, the accountability does weigh heavy at times, I think, because if you think about it, the jobs that your leadership provides doesn't just provide for you and your shareholders. It provides for the people that you employ, the people that depend on the people you employ, and all those sorts of things. And I think that survival leadership aspect isn't, like I say, it's not just about like stopping the business from failing. It's a case of we're in setup mode, we're in change mode, we're in transformation mode. There's a hell of a lot of different versions of the same kind of thing. It's the fight flight style type of leadership there. Ross, what's your verdict? What's your feeling on what survival leadership is?
I think ultimately survival leadership is something that is a mindset of either defense or growth. Those are the two things. So when something bad happens inside of any agency, any business, you have levers which you've got some sort that you can kind of pull on and being able to make those. So usually what happens is you make these decisions quarterly or annually based on forecasting, and it's all very, this is why agency businesses are great, because they're very slow, predictable. They're formula businesses. However, when shit hits the fan with things like pandemics or downturns in economies or whatever it may be, you then need to take that 90-day plan, that year's plan. You need to execute it and turn it around within a week. So it's really just having. There's a lovely scene in Glen Ross. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the movie, where Alec Baldwin says, "You know what you need to sell real estate? Brass balls." And that's kind of what you need to have in order to be an agency leader, because sometimes you need to make some pretty hardcore decisions very quickly. And the way in which you do that is being tuned into your numbers and always be forward looking. But if you're a defensive leader or if you're a growth leader, will very much dictate what that word means to you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different types of leadership anyway within the survival or the growth mode, as it were. And like finding your kind of natural state of leadership is almost an individual thing in of itself. And depending on the type of agency, depending on the type of service that you deliver, sometimes that can be more transactional than anything else. And the last thing you want to be is autocratic every single day. But sometimes a little bit of autocratic decision making is a requirement. Part of this episode, I kind of want to talk about how you come out of that survival mode, survival leadership decision type space, and go into growth or just normal cruising altitude mode, because it's quite often it's not easy to detect when you're out of that danger zone. It's not easy to detect when you're out of, we're at fast-paced growth mode, because there is a lot of momentum that carries, even though things don't necessarily move as quickly. I often say to the agencies that I work in, the acceleration that we're working on, that some of those things aren't as quick. It's not like days. It's clients pay monthly, staff are paid monthly, bills are paid monthly. If you don't have to make a decision immediately. And if you make a decision immediately, it's usually going to be emotionally led. And how do you come out of that, like that mode? So the cortisol is quite high.
I mean, I can tell you my way, and it's not very impressive. So there's been two major punches in the mouth for my agency. 3 actually, if you count when I originally came to London and joined up with someone, but we'll just count the 2 since the pandemic. The way in which I came out of it was hitting the bottle pretty hard. The first time, I think it was 12 pints of Guinness and then missing a weekend. And the second time was a bottle of whiskey. Not great. But being able to bounce back 24, 48 hours later and then start putting in healthy habits into your life. And it's interesting, like, see if you're training every day, like other things actually fall into place because they have to. Like if you're running every day, lifting every day, you have to eat well, because if you don't, you'll be done in. Same with running an agency when it comes to survival. It's like if you don't do certain things, you don't discipline yourself, it's not going to happen. So the transition for me, I wish I had better resilience to say, oh, I just went into monk mode and I just hunkered down and I'd done this and I'd done that. Truth of the matter is, one of the big things that is to Type A's advantage is we have a big war chest, meaning that I'm a stingy Scotsman and I hold on to cash. We are very well capitalized. We've got a big old runway, more than is kind of required, just in case any of this stuff happens, so that we don't need to make any bad decisions. But that's how I came out of it, really, was through exercise and just the basic pillars of health. But I hit the wall twice, like really badly. There's no like fairy tale story there.
Well, speaking of, should we talk about a bit of the agency story? Gareth, you've been running Seeker for quite a while, and I know that you had incredible growth. You grew. I can't remember what the publication was, but you mentioned it on stage at the SEO exclusive up in Manchester, that was put on by SEO for Hire the other week, and I thought, I was growing my agency at the same time as you were growing yours, and I said to you the other week, I was watching thinking, this guy's growing out stratospherically, but that's not just the story, is it? Like there's more to it than just it. I see the numbers at the end on the publication. You have to live it. So what's your story?
Exactly, yeah. So yes, certainly sometimes you can go too fast. Growth can happen too quickly, and you can get a little bit ahead of yourself. The organization's not ready for the scale. You've got capital, you've got revenue coming in, and but money doesn't fix all of the problems that will crop up, for sure. There's growth that needs to happen elsewhere outside of the revenue, culturally, emotionally, your experience, for myself as a leader, and then also for my team leads and everybody in the business. So I think we placed on the Deloitte UK Fast 50, 25th, and 25th fastest growing tech company in the UK, and that's based on top line revenue. And it was going up until that point. To be honest, it was all going according to plan, and it was going great. I think that was so. It was our first 4 years, I think. So it's from year 1 to year 4. That's the time period that they measure, and things had gone really well. I think we had a really great product, really great service. We got fantastic results, despite not being particularly good at sales and marketing. Seeker never has, in terms of, that certainly doesn't match what I feel like we do for our clients. And but so we're more harvesters than hunters, for sure. And we had brands that had grown with us, from small retainers up to like very, very significantly higher than the industry average retainers. And we had like 6 of these, and they kept growing. And it was, so we, somebody told me you should apply, you should put this in for the Deloitte thing, because this is pretty fast growth. And then the pandemic hit. So and at the same time, I just taken over my former business partner's responsibility, bought her shares back, and took on with not really much of an earnout. So I'd taken on the responsibility of her role as well. So you hear often in a business you need your visionary and your integrator or your implementer, and that's quite I hear that quite often. I think I guess I probably identify with the visionary role, and I need similar complementary skill sets around me to really thrive and reach my potential. And so handling that, coming to terms with being the sole leader, shareholder, and the founder of the business, going into lockdown, and really not really fully prepared for that. I mean, I guess none of us were. So I do have some sympathy for myself, but yeah, that was an example of not being prepared for the worst scenario.
And Ross, you've been on this train for a while as well now. You started in container ships. No, containers from container ships. Sorry. Talk a little bit about your story and leadership lessons as you've gone.
Yeah, well, when I first moved from Edinburgh to London, we could get office space for 20 people for 800 quid. It just happened to be in container ships and container units in Elephant and Castle. At the time, we had like airlines as clients. I remember they came over to see us in the shipping containers. They're like, "Oh, so you're not spending the money in an office then?" I'm like, "Bastards, no, I'm not." Yeah, the kind of whole process for me coming out of the pandemic, I'm really annoyed at myself. I wish I could redo that because it's interestingly like not having a mentor or some sort of coach, and that's not like a plug or anything like that, but not having someone there to talk to. I know, but like not having someone there is a real problem because I was listening to all the doom and gloom. I had no one to talk to about it. I was literally just on my own and locked in a 1-bedroom flat, unable to contact people.
Yeah.
And I went into this kind of, well, the world's over mentality. And I started doing like hardcore defense siege tactics, which was the totally wrong thing to do because 6 months later, I think most of our industry had like the biggest boom they've ever had in the history of the internet, like just because it was all digital services. So if I could go back, I would tell myself to just not listen to anything around me, which makes you a little brazen. But now when I hear, oh, the economy this, the economy that, I'm like, fuck the economy. Like, I'm just going to keep cracking on because I'm a small business. Like, what you gonna do if the pound dives, if inflation does this? Like, what are you going to do? What choice do you have? So now my mentality is very different.
Yeah, I just to touch on the bit where you didn't have anyone to talk to and stuff, and I think there's a distinction here to be made around speaking to someone professionally from a therapeutic point of view, because they have a very good place in this world because an awful lot of people need someone to talk to in a structured way. From a business point of view, they don't often know very much about the mechanics of businesses, so mentorship, support, that sort of stuff. If you can find someone who's been there and done that, or if you can find someone that you can have a rapport with, that you can have as a bit of a friendly face to have a chat to, it does help because it is lonely, especially when you're a sole director as well. Whether the times are good or the times are bad, it's nice to share a sip of champagne with someone and share that punch in the face if you have to.
It is, and actually one of the things that I'll say is the one saving grace of the pandemic, because it was all digital, was that after an interaction with someone, you could completely, like, it was like once we hang this up, you're not in my room, right?
Yeah.
So when you're going through that stuff and you're speaking to a team or you're speaking to clients, you can present with like gregariousness and energy and for an hour. You can keep up for an hour, and then the moment you hit the button, you're just like, so that was the one saving grace.
This is a good time to bring up Sophie Brannan's question, actually, because like when we had good times in the agency, it felt really easy to celebrate. When there were bad times, it felt a little bit harder to talk through. How do you guys how have you guys managed that sort of transparency, but the balance of kind of fear that you would have if you have to speak to staff? Gareth, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really good question because I think your team want that transparency, because if they're aware and you're honest about the situation, then I think it can certainly help with the anxiety about what's happening in the economy. So during the pandemic, when we had to unfortunately make some layoffs, we put the whole P&L up on the town hall, the monthly town hall, and said, here's the P&L. This is how we're doing. And I was advised against that. People told me, you know, they won't understand the mechanics. They won't understand the numbers. You're going to scare them. And I'm like, well, what have I got to lose? What have I got to hide? It is what it is, and they're either going to leave, and in which case that's you know, I fully support that, because you need people there who are sort of committed, or they're going to be up for the fight. And it certainly did. It does divide the team that way, and we started doing that in the pandemic, and then we've been doing it ever since, actually. And last year was Seeker's. Despite being a third of the, in terms of headcount, the workforce, our bottom line net profit was our most profitable year in the history of the 7 years that Seeker's been running. So whilst we had this, you know, fancy Deloitte award, and you know, that's based on top line and thing, when you're in that growth mode, you know, the margins do suffer. But I came out of that having really learned some valuable lessons, and we were able to optimize the business last year, and like I said, it was our best year ever, and we've continued to put those figures on the screen, so they know how much profit is being made in the business. And I like to be transparent there, because
I mean, that's very transparent.
It is,
which has its benefits, as you sort of said. It also has, you know, relatively heavy risks to a certain degree. Ross, what's your take on this? When, you know, the good times and the bad times, and balancing that transparency.
I've changed it over time. So, I mean, at the start, I used to give them very vague numbers. I was like, this month we made between £1 and £100 million, somewhere in the middle. Like, I just was very shit with them. The pandemic, I told them what our losses were, but not the P&L, and not absolute numbers. So I didn't say we lost £500,000 in revenue in the space of 30 days. Didn't say that, because I thought that was a bit hard to swallow, because we're a small business. But for so interestingly, same as Gareth, over the last quarter, not the last year, we made some big structural changes, and it's been our highest revenue and net profit that we've ever had in the history of the business as well. And I think we probably had to go through that, because we done the same thing. We were doubling year over year right up into the pandemic, and then we just got completely knocked out. So same for us. And when we had to make a round of redundancies in Q4 last year, which is still very fresh, we actually put the hard numbers out and showed everyone. And every month anyway, we show everyone like what our profit is. We even have a little running joke, and I say, and this is our EBITDA. Who knows what that means? And we say it every single month, and they still have the time forget what it means. But it's like a nice way to get and why it's important.
So I think the balance needs to be an "it depends" answer, I guess, from Sophie's question, because you know your team's best. So Gareth, you know, it technically is a risk doing what you did, but it's also it's a balanced risk against the people you knew that were going to see it. And similarly, like, you know, Ross, you're talking about you know, being a little bit more clear, but you know, not hard numbers and stuff like that to a certain degree, but you are giving updates, and again, that's in balance to what the team will appreciate and what they'll recognize. And I'm not saying people are stupid, because they're not, but if you give them something which isn't connected enough to their job role, then potentially it can be scary, because not just because they don't understand it, they could Google it and learn it, but it's a case of any additional kind of parameters that are outside of their normal wheelhouse are potentially, you know, a little bit fearful. But we've grown our agencies, we've lost stuff in agencies, we've had a pandemic, we've changed, we've learned, we've grown. What lessons have we learned, guys, for the next crisis from a leadership perspective? What are we thinking? You know, have these lessons been lessons, or are they all like you haven't had a chance for the introspection that's going to allow for the emergence of out of survival leadership?
For me, it's really just levers. So like building a content. So the funny thing is, like, agencies are sales businesses, regardless of how you cut it. And in the back end, there's the problem with that is there's huge operational drag. So if you sell lots and lots of stuff, you need to hire lots and lots of people, train them up. So, and there's like a 3-month period before they're any good to to anyone inside of your world, right? So you're always playing this kind of operational thing versus a front end thing. But for next time, for me, it's a content machine. So that, because the way in which in 2019 I was all over the internet, we done incredibly well through partnerships, through content production. We had a dedicated video studio. We were pumping out crazy amounts, and it done so well. But it was ephemeral. It's all news based. So like after a week, it just was like poof into that. So all that work we done for 2 years previous was actually technically useless. So building out a content machine that actually, if we stop, it'll still keep going over time, and building out so paid, owned, and earned. That's just the classic thing, right? So paid channels, owned channels, earned channels. That's the big thing for us, and also just knowing your numbers. So we never used to forecast because we typically only run 15 clients at a time. They're high value, but you just don't need, reams and reams of forecast data and, profit lines per client and all that. You just don't need it. But now having it, you can really start to see some things way ahead of time. And it's made me think that, this business is such a roller coaster, to now, I can see there's a dip here in September because that's when this client's contract ends. So I need to do it XYZ. Our lead amount is it. Like, you can just start doing a lot of really smart looking into the future. So you still get the hits, but they're not surprises, and you've planned for it, which is much easier to take.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson from the hits. But you look at the roller coaster going up and down like this at the time because you're zoomed in. You zoom out because you have forecasting, you have a strategy. Like, how many agencies say that they've got one? Get a strategy, guys. If you're watching this and you're running an agency and you don't have a strategy, find someone to get a strategy with you, because you can zoom out and you realize that actually looks really tiny, and you can take the knocks because you know where you're going, you know the future, you know the direction you're traveling in. You understand that these little things are just minor course corrections to a certain degree, obviously. But it makes your level of leadership a zoomed out approach as well. You can take that mini emotional hit out of the equation when you're talking and dealing with your teams. You can treat people a little bit nicer, or you can take a moment to listen to them, because you know that right now, today, this thing hurts, but probably in a week we'll be quite happy again for whatever reason. Gareth, what
just to add to that before you go into Gareth, Chris, a little hack that I have is it's my start page on my browser. So when I open my browser up, the first thing I see every single day is the forecast. Now, I ignore it most days because I'm not a psycho, but it's the reminder that's important,
I think if you have to say you're not a psycho, maybe
right, I'm not racist, but you're like, really, tell me more. Yeah, I know.
Gareth, what kind of lessons have you taken away from the bad times, should we say, when you were having troubles in leadership for the next round? Because it will happen eventually. That's just nature in this game.
Yeah, it's nature of the game. It's an occupational hazard, unfortunately. So, firstly, you need to look after yourself. Your own. Ross touched on it earlier on. Working out, eating well, your own mental health. Because if you don't look after that, then you can't care for others. And I've certainly been subject to that. I would say in the past, and I should have done to prioritize my own health, so that I can keep functioning, keep performing, and amidst the fog of war and a crisis and so on. So yeah, without that, you can't really do much else. Be prepared, which goes back to really the theme of the introduction and what Ross was saying about having your forecast, checking your forecast, flying by the numbers. And watching your bottom line, because even still, people, we were at this great event last week, and other agencies come over when they ask. One of the first questions when they're trying to learn more about you and your business is, how many are you? And I just like, what, head count or pounds or
it's almost a meme.
Top line, or culturally, or so they're focusing on head count is not really a measure of success. I am so much more happier a with an agency that's a third of the size of it once was. We are so much more profitable than when we were up to sort of 50 people. And I'm so much happier as a person. I've got a much better work-life balance, and so have my team as well. So fly by those numbers and look after yourself, and then you're more prepared.
I think a big part of that is take what you see externally with a pinch of salt to a degree, and that how many are you kind of question also translates to seeing people shout about the wins online. You see people's holiday pictures online, you go, oh, I really wish I was having a holiday, but that's their 1 week that they're sharing that picture. So you're seeing everyone else's holiday and you're thinking that you're having a terrible time. The numbers bit, and something that kind of irks me a little bit. I speak to a lot of agencies, and I get it. Numbers are important because they're important, but what are you doing it for? Why are you running an agency? Is the primary thing. If you're running it for money, then run it as a good business. If you're running it for money, treat it like it deserves. If you're not running it for money, and money is part of that purpose because you just want to create good things and you really like stuff, whatever, I don't know what that might well be, then money has to be involved and you know your numbers. But when someone says, how is the agency going? You've got a yardstick for that because it's got to connect to whatever reason you do this for. And like success then is bound to the thing that you want to do, not anything else. You could run an insanely profitable 3-person agency and only really be doing it because the purpose in life is to travel the world and be able to take your laptop and still service good clients. That's what you want to do. That's your sense of success. Ignore the numbers you see, as long as the bottom line pays the bills and you can pay your liabilities. And if you look at it that way, problems aren't the same.
That's true, but like just to like spar with you a little bit on that. It is and it isn't, right? Because the funny thing is, if someone starts a business, there's always this little like angel and devil on your shoulder, and it's like, yeah, but you could do more, you could make more. You're not really sure why, but it's just like, if you're a type A personality, it's like the mountain's there, let's climb it. Why? Just because it's there, let's go. Like there's that. I think there's a lot with business owners, like that's a thing that they want. So the idea of like being content just does not jive with me at all. Now, maybe this is something that I need to pay for like £100 an to a therapist to work out why. But I think a lot of people are like that. Like this striving, the struggle is actually something that is the selling point to doing stuff almost. And now, don't get me wrong, we'll all complain about it and see how hard it is. But the idea of being like contented like that with your little 3-person thing is a very idealized view, because when you're 3 people or 10 people, whatever you are, you feel everything. So if you see, if a client goes, or like a leader in your team goes, you really notice that. If you're 50 people, you don't.
Agreed.
Gareth, maybe you could talk about that a little bit more. So like you feel the waves less in a big boat. And so that for me is something that I'm personally striving for, just to grow a big boat, albeit slowly. And I don't like the idea of having a small company, because I just think it makes us very vulnerable.
I agree. I think not to disparage agency owners, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. Most agency owners are agency owners because they're really good at a thing that they deliver, and they learn to be a business owner eventually at a certain point, whether it's with problems or not. And the ideology aspect should probably remain, but you should then go, okay, well, I want to travel the world and run the agency at the same time. I need this many monies in order to do that and not feel unhappy or feel the pain of something lost. You can still run your 3-person agency, but you don't have the other things to deal with. But if you start the agency based on, I'm really good at delivering this service, give me all the money, then eventually you end up with an agency with people problems. You end up with an agency then, that has lots of client turnover. And yeah, you've got a big boat, but you're in a typhoon. So it doesn't really matter. It's still a problem. I think the lessons that you can learn from the bad times will help you go, I need to run this like a business. I need to know the numbers. I need to feel where I'm going. I need to see the distance. And those are the changes that will make you like a better leader and a better listener.
Yeah, agreed. And I deliberately use boat and not submarine because it's a touchy subject.
Timely. Moving on. So you've come out of the growth mode. You come out of the hard times, whatever that might well be. You might have done high growth time into a bad era or whatever. But now you're in this kind of, we're where we want to be. We need to kind of maintain the status quo to a degree. Obviously, you're not saying stay exactly the same. You just don't want to change a huge amount. This is the time when you can be that kind of more visionary leader. That's the time when you can be a little more transformational. You can be a bit more democratic and things like that. So how have you identified when the right time is to go from my stupid pun here, survival to thrival? But Gareth, when you've come out of those times, how have you sort of shifted gears? Have you done it intentionally? Has it been a natural state?
I have. Well, first I went back into the trenches and back on client strategy. I first identified what needed to be fixed to get out of that core functional operating state that we were in. And then Ross talked earlier on about getting your head down for, I've forgotten how you described it, but ducking down for 6 months, focus. That's basically what I did, and actually switched off social media, switched off the media, the news as well, because I was very susceptible to all of that and the doomsday, with the pandemic and things, and then now same. I don't really watch, don't listen to what's going on in the news now. It doesn't really influence my business decisions. It's the forecast and it's the pipeline and it's getting my clients results now. So I did that, and then I came up for air after a while when I was like, right, we're back in the green now and we're ticking over. Now what's the next stage? And I always think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is obviously for individual needs, and at the bottom you've got your physiological needs: food, shelter, water, etc., safety. That's very much that once you've achieved that, then you can move up to the next layer, which is, I've forgotten what it is actually. Is it growth or self-actualization or something like that?
I was going to say, are you about to tell us you're self-actualized?
No, absolutely not.
We're not all.
Well, I don't know, safe.
Just me. It's fine.
Go on.
No, just me.
Yeah. So then that gave me the opportunity to then think about, okay, we've got, we hired a new team, trained them up again, and got them working really, really well, and built a strong culture which aligns with the values that I'd always, originally sort of set. And then I got to think. Then I had the first opportunity. Really, yeah, maybe I am. This is what I'm about to say. What's in it for me now? Now the team are safe. They've got, we're not a financial risk. We've mitigated the threats as best as we possibly can. And that's when, back in January, I thought, well, I've always wanted to go traveling. Not forever. I don't want to live a nomad all of my life. So, I moved out of my place in January, and I've been on the move since, traveling around, mostly around Europe for now. I spent most of my year in Spain, and going to the events and getting back out there to the events, by the way, is, I would say, absolutely crucial for me. Similar, I think what Ross was saying earlier on. I didn't really ask for help from anyone. I was living on my own during lockdown. I was allowed out for an hour a day. I was going through a really tough redundancy process. I didn't want to bother anyone, and that was the wrong decision. Actually, it took a whole year or so to actually come out, and I published a post on LinkedIn and told them what lockdown was like and what those times were like for me. And I had hundreds of likes on the post, and thousands, tens of thousands of impressions on it, and so many people, offering their support and DMing me. It's like, Gareth, I had no idea. If you told me, I would have been straight there. And then getting back out to the events, I realized, actually, yeah, people have got time for me. Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier on, Chris, about social media, everyone's doing fantastic. But when you go to these events and you sit down and have a beer with people, and you start to have a one-to-one conversation with your other fellow agencies, and people say, yeah, things are hard, times are tough, I've just made some layoffs, or I've just lost a huge client. And that's really validating, and you can offer your support. There was certainly lots of last week me offering support to others, and I also got a ton of support in the areas that I felt I needed it. So
yeah,
I've completely forgotten what the point of the question was, but hopefully this is helpful info.
Switching gears, and I think a big part of being able to do that is to kind of go, I know where I was, I'm not there now, if that makes any sense at all. What about you, Ross? Is there like a clear switch? Is there something that happens, or is it just ebbs into?
You know, I haven't actually went back into thrival mode from survival mode yet.
Sorry.
I'm a shadow of my former self from 2019 still. But one of the things that has kind of tipped me back into the world a bit more and start to do more marketing, be a public face, start caring more, is community and people. So it was a real horrific thing to be locked away, like Gareth says, for like with only an hour out and not connect to people. So for me now, the thriving comes from being part of the community, meeting people, talking about new like tips and tricks and how the businesses are going and stuff like that. It was actually New Year, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where I decided to sit and just not go out because I was just like, I don't want to be around people. And I heard fireworks go. I was invited to things, but I was hearing fireworks going off and stuff like that. And I wrote down, I have maybe 50 more of these to see in my lifetime. I have maybe 50 more summers to enjoy. And that really was a bit of a reframe for me. It's like the thriving was a reframe to, well, what does that thriving actually mean for you? Because you would never change anything in the company. You've always got the armor on because you need it, because you're always going to there'll be another punch in the face coming up any moment now, I'm sure. So you build things in for security. So you're always in this kind of like ready state just in case something's going to kick off at any moment. But between things kicking off, making more of it and being around more people, being more in the community, I think is for me anyway, such a huge thing. I get a massive kick out of meeting people and, shooting the shit.
So last few minutes, one tip each. Gareth, any tips, advice to your fellow leader friends around, that times of survival leadership? Because there's a lot going on right now, and I suspect that people are listening to this and thinking they recognize some of the things that we've all talked about here. So any tip from you?
Yeah, community, as Ross said. No, like get involved with the community. And if you're running an agency, don't always see other agencies as competitors, and don't play the game, but play it cleanly and fairly. There's lots of underhand tactics going on there, and unfortunately, I believe in karma, and there's poaching and intellectual property being stolen and replicated and things. That stuff, the word gets around that you're burning bridges. So play the game fairly, and actually other agencies are super nice and helpful and want you to succeed as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Sometimes you'll pitch against some other agencies because obviously, but that doesn't mean you're aggressive competitors. And there are some underhand things that go on, but the vast majority of people who run agencies are just good human beings, and they just want to get by and they want to have a nice life as well. And people actually want to help. So reach out to people, because sometimes leadership's hard most of the time. Ross, what's your tip?
Mine's is boring. Sorry. It's do not look at absolute numbers, look at ratios. So you'll have a burn rate in your company, and you'll have a top line and you'll have a bottom line, and a ratio between them. One of the real moments where I realized that I was a dumbass was I was really concerned with net profit and getting our OPEX down, which is not what to focus on. It's getting your gross profit right, because the OPEX is such a small thing. So that was a big light bulb moment that I should have known from day one, but I didn't. And also burn rate. So that's personal burn rate and business burn rate. If your lifestyle is not expensive and you can take pleasure in things that are not expensive, then you're much more likely to be resilient and able to take risks. Turn of the pandemic, I moved into a 3-bedroom riverside flat in East London. That was a mistake. The burn rate on that was $3,000 a month and that wasn't before the lights went on. That was stupid. You could live your entire existence for that in a month. And that's what you should do unless you get into these, unless you sell and you're a big baller. But just watch your lifestyle inflation, your lifestyle creep, and watch your ratios is my big tip.
That's awesome. I think the only tip I've got is ask people for help if you need it. There is no such thing as a perfect leader. However, coming up very soon, a nice plug for Control-Alt-Lead, the digital agency leadership book. It's not a guide. It is not a how-to. There you go. You got a copy. Look already.
I feel left out now. Where's mine?
I've not got an address for you.
Okay. Well, I have a virtual mailbox thing, so I can go and collect it from there.
All right.
Please.
But it's not a guide. It's not like one of those books where it's kind of half teaching you something. It's a book where you're having some trouble at a certain point. You can open the page around that thing, read a little bit, and it helps kind of frame some other stuff. That's one there. Adapting to change. That's a good chapter. Thanks very much, guys. Really great having a chat and having some nice open conversation. Hopefully this starts a good bit of conversation in the OMG community as well. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks everyone for listening to us.
Thank you very much, Chris. And just as a parting word, if anyone wants to talk or they ever go through any of the things that Gareth and I have been through, I'm sure I'm probably speaking for Gareth here as well, please do reach out. Happy to talk. I'm very transparent. I'll show you numbers. We'll go through it. And even if it's just a little moan, happy to do that too.
Wonderful.
Likewise. Same here.
Thank you, guys. And speak to you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.